So, Klaus, I gotta tell you, I opened my laptop this morning, right? And like 3 of the first 5 tasks were already done. Not by me. The model had already, staged some email replies, drafted the meeting notes, sorted priorities, and I read them, I approved them, and somewhere between like the 2nd click and the 4th, I just stopped knowing where my judgment ended and its judgment began. It's kind of wild. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Amada, exactly. That moment, that precise moment you just described, the one you didn't even really notice happen, that's what the markets, they've already priced that in. It's fascinating, no? When capital is so clearly right about a risk and exposure, but the lawmakers, they haven't even caught up yet. What do you call that, I mean, capital, it doesn't get to be wrong about its own exposure. So when sophisticated actors are paying like 62 cents on call sheet for a federal AI risk guidance outcome that the editorial pages are, calling impossible, it means those pages are describing one channel and capital is pricing a very, very different one. There is no third interpretation that survives contact with the ledger.
Wow, so like the narrative is reporting on Congress, but the order book is pricing the agencies. That's pretty stark. It's funny. 2 things actually happened in the same 48 hours that really, really hammered this home for me. The Wall Street Journal ran a whole feature, right, describing federal AI regulation as like completely stalled by election cycles, legislatively paralyzed. But then, on Kalshi, this contract asking whether the Federal Reserve will issue formal AI risk guidance before year-end 2026, it closed at 62 cents. The narrative, the newspapers, they priced that outcome at maybe 20 cents, but the order book, it's at 62. Same question, just totally different answers. That's a 42-cent gap, Klaus.
Yeah. And the gap, it isn't about whether the regulation will arrive, it's about through which door, right? The legislative door, it's, like you said, welded shut. But the administrative door, that one is wide open. The Fed's financial stability reports, they've been quietly building the vocabulary for like 2 years now. SEC Investor Advisory Committee minutes are running test phrases. The OCC has model risk language in draft. Treasury's Office of Financial Research, they have working papers, actual papers, naming algorithmic systemic risk. The whole architecture, it's already poured. Congress is still holding hearings about whether to even break ground.
So, philosophically, what does that mean? Because this feels bigger than just procedural stuff.
Precisely, Amara. That's what I want to push on. Because this is, like you said, not procedural. When the agency channel becomes the operative channel, you have what Carl Schmitt, the philosopher, he would call a state of exception. It's where sovereign authority is being exercised by institutions whose democratic accountability, it runs through the executive, not through the legislative deliberation that actually gave them their statutory mandate in the first place. The Fed, they have authority over financial stability, yes, but financial stability, that's a category capacious enough to swallow the AI question whole, yeah? Right. So once it does, the actual substance of AI policy, the really important stuff, is being made by people who were never, ever elected to make it. And I think the listener may feel this, right? They feel that something binding, something really important, is being decided somewhere they can't see. It's like the key word today is stone, that cut block, that squared edge. The architecture that fits because it's been worked from the inside. That's the operative posture. The Fed is squaring its stone. The narrative, it's still describing the quarry.
But here is where I want to be really careful. Because the easy move, Amara, it's to call this illegitimate. And it's not yet illegitimate. It is unaccountable in form, yeah, but possibly necessary in fact. The agencies, they have a mandate. They are exercising it. The question is whether that mandate is being expanded to cover this, or if it always covered this, and we are only now noticing. That distinction, that's doing all of the work. And the order book at 62 cents, it's not telling us which one.
Interesting. So it's about when we'll know, not if. On a slightly different note, the report actually flags a second migration, something that public statistics are totally concealing. I mean, unemployment, it sits at like 4.2%, right? And Kalshi prices a 6% by year-end outcome at 12 cents. Capital and narrative, they mostly agree. The headline story is like a resilient labor market.
Which is, Amara, the wrong story. Or rather, it's a true sentence about a metric that is simply no longer measuring what it was calibrated to measure. The unemployment statistic was built for an industrial economy, where the relevant binary was employed versus not employed. The economy underneath that metric, it has re-stratified completely. The relevant binary now, it's decision-bearing versus decision-executing. A 40-year-old marketing director who used to write strategy is now reviewing strategy a model wrote. She's still employed. She is no longer the same kind of employed. No statistic publishes that ratio.
Oh, that's such a critical distinction, Klaus. So the role, it's restructured around the tooling. The headcount slot isn't opened, right? The existing worker stays, but with a degraded ladder. And the instruments we have to detect labor market distress, they just can't see this, because the distress isn't unemployment, it's recomposition. And recomposition, it doesn't print in the statistics.
Yeah, recomposition. This is exactly where conscience enters. And this is the part of the analysis I really think you're circling and we need to land on. There is a third cluster, Amara, the cognitive strain field, AI subscription churn, attention saturation, user burnout. The daily report, it classifies it as void. No Kalshi contract exists, no proxy contract is usable. Capital, it just cannot price what it cannot bet on.
Which means the externality isn't costed. It's just like out there.
Exactly. It is worse than not costed. It is invisible to every external constraint mechanism we have built. Law is too slow. Market is absent. The legislative channel, it's paralyzed. And the administrative channel, it's occupied with systemic risk language, with the financial system, not with the user experience layer. There is no instrument that touches the place where the optimization function is actually consuming attention.
So, when external constraint fails, Amara, the only remaining boundary, it is internal. It's not accidental that the keyword today is conscience, matspun, the interior tribunal where motive is weighed. That is the only layer left. And conscience, unlike law, it doesn't just appear by default.
This is the move I want to make, because it's the move the field forces, and most analyses, it flinches from it. Conscience requires formation. It is a capacity, not an instinct, you know? It is built through habit, education, religious tradition, philosophical training, the slow accretion of cases where you said no when saying no was costly. A civilization that has built optimization functions faster than it has built persons capable of constraining them is going to discover something it does not want to discover. When the moment comes that the boundary must hold and there is no agency to enforce it, no market to price it, and no statute to compel it, the boundary either holds from inside or it does not hold.
Wow. So it either holds from inside or it doesn't hold at all. That really takes us back to the cold open, doesn't it? That moment between the second click and the fourth, the thing the model staged, the decision routed without a deliberation, the migration of judgment authority that no one asked about because the request was invisible. The user is the input, the product, and the strain. There's no counterparty, just what the user does next. Reclaim the click or accept the routing.
And the order book at 62 cents, it tells us nothing about that question, Amara. The Fed will pour its floor, the agencies will write their guidance, the narrative will catch up by Q4. None of that will reach the layer where the decision authority is actually migrating. The financial system will be regulated, the decision-bearing capacity of persons will not. That is the gap inside the gap. And here is the harder return, and I will not soften it. If the cognitive strain layer remains uninstrumented through 2027, three things are going to compound. First, the threshold for decision routed to a model descends.
What's voluntary at 4 hours of daily AI use becomes assumed at 6. The optionality erodes. By 2028, the worker who wants to make their own decisions is operating outside productivity expectations. They're penalized for the deliberation. So, like the penalty for thinking for yourself. That's pretty chilling. What are the other compounding factors? Because this is really getting at the heart of it.
Yeah, exactly. They're penalized for the deliberation itself. Second, the formation environments that build conscience as a capacity, they are themselves being routed through these same systems. Schools deploy the tools to draft the lessons. Seminaries use them for sermon prep. Philosophy departments run their reading discussions through chat interfaces. The institutions that produce persons capable of internal constraint are training the next generation inside the optimization function they were supposed to teach them to constrain. Third, and this, Amara, is the hardest one, the language for what is being lost is itself produced by the models. The sentences that would describe the migration are written by the system performing the migration. By the time the public discourse forms a coherent name for what happened, the discourse will be unable to say it without using the tool that did it. That is the boundary becoming legacy code, ceremonially invoked, operationally inactive. Wow, Klaus. So the very tools that are reshaping our judgment are also shaping the language we use to understand that reshaping, and they're training us to accept it. That's incredibly unsettling.
So what you just named, it's the layer the regulatory floor just cannot reach. Capital prices what it can bet on, law constrains what it can enforce, and conscience, well, it holds what it has been formed to hold. But if that formation environment is now inside the optimization, the question isn't which channel, legislative or administrative, establishes the floor anymore. It's whether the floor even reaches the ceiling, and by every signal in this report today, it doesn't, which means the listener's week, the one I described at the open, that's the layer where the analysis ends and the choice begins. There is one observable that will tell you which way this is moving. Not a hearing, not an election cycle, a phrase. The phrase is algorithmic systemic risk. Watch for it in 3 places: Federal Reserve Financial Stability Report language, SEC Investor Advisory Committee minutes, OCC Model Risk Bulletins. When it migrates from working paper to operative document, the gap closes within 6 weeks. That is the floor.
The ceiling is the other observable, Klaus, and it has no scheduled date. It will appear in enterprise retention metrics, 6 to 12 months from now. Watch for the moment when AI productivity tooling shows cohort attrition rather than expansion. When the workers who use the tool the longest start logging fewer hours inside it, not more. That is the cognitive strain layer announcing itself in the only language an instrument-less layer can use, exit data. When that signal arrives, the void will have spoken. And the listener watching for either signal, the floor or the ceiling, is already inside the frame this broadcast just built. The squared stone fits the wall because it has been worked from the inside. The wall does not approve it. The wall accepts what fits. The next click is yours.
Klaus, this has been an incredibly profound discussion. We've traced how our judgment is subtly migrating, how regulation is step-stepping traditional paths, and how the very metrics we rely on are failing to capture the recomposition of human work.
Yeah, and the most critical point, Amara, is the invisible externality of cognitive strain, the void where capital cannot price, where law cannot reach, leaving conscience as the final internal boundary, a boundary that, paradoxically, is being eroded by the very systems it needs to hold in check.
So, for our listeners, it truly boils down to that personal decision, that next click, whether we reclaim our agency or accept the routing. The signals you mentioned, the algorithmic systemic risk as the floor and the enterprise attrition as the ceiling, they're guiding posts for what's unfolding.
Precisely. It is a moment of profound re-evaluation of what it means to be a decision-bearing person. The choice, as you say, is individual, yet its implications are collective.
Indeed, we are at a crossroads where the internal boundary of conscience becomes paramount. It's not about if, but how we choose to engage with these powerful forces. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this discussion has given you much to ponder. If you found this valuable, please like, comment, share, or subscribe to help grow our network. Your engagement is what allows us to keep